So Neal Morse, you're making a new concept album. Tell me, what are some of the ingredients on this? Well, first off, we're taking a good concept from a book that's been written a long time ago. Yeah? Then we overinflate it with lots of biblical text and Bible passages and religious concepts. Yeah? Okay. And finally we add great sounds, like things from this album and past musicians that I've worked with, like this album. How about something that hasn't been done before? Originality? I'll get back to you on that one. The Similitude of a Dream by the Neal Morse Band. So I've been looking forward to this album pretty much right from the moment that Neal Morse has kind of hinted at it, and those musicians that have worked on it, Randy George and Mike Portnoy, have hailed this as being one of the best works ever. Mike Portnoy going so far as to say that it could stand alongside such masterpieces as The Wall and The Who's Tommy. So I got excited, and the more they released on this album, the more I thought, okay, this actually might have some merits. Neal Morse is kind of a legend of today's progressive rock, starting off within Spock's Beard, rediscovering himself and becoming a born-again Christian, and kind of setting himself apart from that band and really working on his own solo stuff within just Neal Morse, and really diving into kind of the Christianity and bringing that within his music within pretty much every work that he's been on in some way, shape, or form. Each album that he's been putting out since then have really followed kind of that same formula, and within the past two releases that he has released, Momentum and The Great Experiment, both of these I was really disappointed in, just because it was just a lot more of the same. There wasn't a whole lot of new stuff that had been presented here. So on the one hand, I was really excited for Similitude of a Dream because everybody had been praising it so much. But on the other hand, I was a little weary just because of how much he had already been hashing out. So getting into this album, it is another concept album, a double discer, and we've actually seen quite a lot of double disc concept albums this year. Some have worked, some haven't. A lot of what the band had been saying about this album being really, really great and really amazing does hold quite a bit of water. I would have to say this is probably my favorite work by Neal Morse, or the Neal Morse Band, since, well, probably as far as I can remember. I'm not overly that familiar with his whole past discographies. I have a lot of his live albums, but as an overall realization of music, this one's actually really, really good. When I first started listening to this, it really hit the ground running. Unlike a lot of his past works where it took its time and really built up the momentum to get going, this one just like right when the light turns green, it hits you and you do not let up at all. There's no real safety net within this album. I feel like a lot of it is just going from one piece to another, to another, to another, to another. It feels much more like, say, a Tommy or a Lamb Lies Down on Broadway or a Wall album, as opposed to some of the other albums that have been put out this year that have tried the whole grand scale storytelling aspect. And the songs on here, there's no real down point as well, which I highly praise. It's really hard to do with this much music. It's really hard not to have a low point, and there is no low point. Probably my favorite thing about this album is just how optimistic it can sound as well. Like, I love the balance of the darkness and the lightness on this. Standout songs for that definitely include the Freedom Song, which is just a ball of fun. That's within the second disc. It's near the end. And it's almost like a country and western song. It's got that same root of the country and western. And I like how it's such a grand switch. Like, it's so different from any other song within this album, and I like it. And I also like that it's a standalone song. It has a very clear start and a very clear end, and a lot of songs on this album don't have that. They do transition right from one song to another, so I like the fact that this song had that clear start and finish.
Son, you've been gone too long. This is your freedom song.
Another thing that I realized that is almost like a shift in tone for Neal Morse is the song lengths on this album. There's no song that goes past a 10-minute mark, which is very strange for him, and I kind of like that. I felt like Neal Morse had painted himself into a box, and he was too afraid to break out of that. So I do like the fact that this album almost pushed him out of that box in certain extents. That can also be argued because a lot of these songs do blend into one another, so it does kind of feel like those songs are of a greater whole, but at least it did force him to try something a little bit new. I also like how fun a lot of these songs are. The one for sure is The Ways of a Fool. This one almost sounds like a Disney villain song at times. And I also like how Neal Morse is taking a little bit more of a back seat on a lot of these songs as well. This is a Neal Morse Band, by the way, so that really shines on this album. He's letting a lot of the other players take center stage within the vocals and within the presentation. And some of the themes on this album, of course, being a concept album, the themes do get presented again and again and again, but it doesn't go over the top as a lot of his past works, and it doesn't get too cringeworthy as well. The one theme that I definitely love is the one from the City of Destruction, or the City of Lights, where it's, you know, gotta get back to the city. It's darker, but a lot more fun as well. You gotta give these boys credit. It was catchy. The City of Destruction theme that was going on there, it was great, and it got stuck in my head almost like an earworm. Once the song finished, and even though the next couple of tracks were really juicy and really meaty, I kept humming the City of Destruction. And there is a lot of long stretches of instrumental pieces, and I feel like this is where the band really stretches their legs. I gotta take my hat off to Mike Portnoy for the drumming work. It's such a breath of fresh air to hear him really play out. There are certain stretches that definitely fit the Neal Morse formula to a T, and I do kind of feel like, okay, I've heard this before. There's actually one stretch of notes that comes in within that, the main theme of like Broken Sky or the battle, that sounds like it's been lifted right out of the Best of Times from Dream Theater. And it's almost, I don't want to say it's like blatantly stolen from there, but I mean, it's only one or two notes away from it. That did take me out a little bit, but the playing and the styles and the music that is there is still 100% enjoyable. If I hadn't heard all those other songs before, I would have just devoured this entirely. So I gotta look at it from that standpoint and really acknowledge just the talent that these guys have. But I do want to draw your attention to a few songs on here, especially the ending of this album. With The Mask, The Confrontation, and The Battle. Especially within The Mask, when we have the theme within the piano that then gets really reintroduced within like the crazy synthesizers that almost sound like alarm bells. And then when we have that demon, or I believe it's like the confrontation straight up with the devil, and I guess that's where the confrontation comes in. This is why I love concept albums, because we've spent so much time now within this journey, this pilgrimage. And so when we get to this point, it's just that rewarding aspect of, oh my god, we finally made it. This is intense. And this is where we really stretch the boundary of what music can do. This was what I loved about The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway so much, because once we get into like that Colony of Slippermen, it's so deep. Or even within, say, like the Passion Play, when you finally get to meet Lucifer at that point. And I think, you know, the comparisons can be drawn within those two albums too, Similitude here. And so I love that, and I love that presentation here, because it does feel like those could be lifted and kind of a synthesized aspect here. That stretch is definitely the biggest highlight, and one that I look forward to, and I like the fact that it's planted right there in the album so that I have something to look forward to at that point. There is one point near the middle point of the confrontation that does sound like a jam session from Dream Theater, and unfortunately, this might be the biggest drawback to the album. Unlike a lot of Neal Morse's stuff, where you have that big epiphany moment and that big, like, that main theme comes back, and it's such a grandiose, and it has that same kind of Supper's Ready reintroduction of the theme, but slowed down, but more emphasis. Here, I don't feel that same sense of earnestness, that same sense of awe that I was kind of expecting with this caliber of an album. And this might be one of the reasons why a lot of these double concept albums this year have kind of fallen flat a little bit, is because when we finally come to the end, I can see where the band was trying to go with it, but it never really hit me in that same feels that I was hoping for. And I think the other big thing about this album is it's good. It is, like, there's no denying this album is a fantastic piece of work, but I don't know if it's quite as good as all the players think it is, and I think that might be one of the big drawbacks to the album, where they're coming through and they're playing what they believe is like a masterpiece of work, when really it's just an amazing piece of work. So I think that has a little bit of a sway on that. Overall, I love this album, and it is one that I probably will be listening to for quite a while, and it is probably the best work that Neal Morse has put out within this decade. And that also includes a lot of his other past projects as well. So I gotta tip my hat off to that. And I gotta say, if you can find it in physical form, definitely pick it up, because this one is needed in your collection. It never really reached that point that I was hoping that it would, but it did provide me with enough to enjoy myself from start to finish and never really want to miss a track. And those meaty hooks and those meaty tracks definitely were meaty. So that's about it. What did you guys think of Similitude of a Dream by the Neal Morse Band? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, let me know by commenting below. I was reviewing all of his past works, so I'm going to leave a playlist up here later on in the end screen for you guys to check out. And thank you so much for voting on your albums. I looked at one of his albums from each of his past works as voted by you. So thank you all for doing that. So thank you guys once again for watching. You guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.